All right, guys, we're going to try this once again. We've rebooted the system here. Looks like we are going live at this point now. And I'm also recording this, so I guess I'll have to jump back to this recording later and deal with some of the issues that we were having here. This is a very serious subject tonight, guys. There is very serious things happening in the world. And of course, it starts off with President Putin and what he said at the 16th Direct Line Question and Answers with Putin held in the new tech-savvy format. Kind of interesting because the Bilderberg meeting is also focusing not just on the populist agenda, but also on AI. Remember, President Putin said once before, whoever controls AI will control the world. But in this particular segment that RT was hosting, this question and answers segment here, the president of Russia actually speaks about a third world war, and in fact one that may bring total annihilation. We're going to be looking at what's happening today because there are 5 simultaneous meetings that are happening in the world at the exact same time. We were looking at some of the Bilderberg videos there where they were talking about 4 meetings, but I know are actually 3 meetings simultaneously. They were talking about NATO, Bilderberg, and the G7. But what they didn't mention, which we were aware of, is that there's 5, not 3, but 5. And it is, of course, the Bilderberg meeting, the NATO meeting, the G7 summit meeting, which President Trump has threatened to walk out on today. I haven't followed up to see if he did or did not. But one thing, though, that is also going on is China, Russia, Iran security meeting at the exact same time, and even U.S. generals meeting with Russian generals in Helsinki, Finland, all at the same time. Are we on the brink of a world war? Is this the setup of a new world order? And that's exactly what we're looking at today here. Let's get right into this on RT here. I want you to hear what President Vladimir Putin had to say as we listen in to this now.
We have one message just up to the topic. So will we see this third world war?
Well, remember Einstein? He said, I don't know what will be the methods of World War III, but the Fourth World War will be waged with sticks and stones. So the realization that the Third World War could mean the end of civilization, this realization, this idea should deter us from dangerous steps globally. As you remember, we've been living in a period of relative peace following the Second World War, and we know that there are regional conflicts out there. You had the Vietnam War, the Korean War. Right now we have some of the conflicts in the Middle East. We have Iraq, Libya, other hot spots. We've never had any global conflicts. Why? The global military powers established a strategic parity. And might find my words not appropriate, but that's true. The fear that each country had instilled the opponents with respect. Now, once the US withdrew from the ABM Treaty, that was actually an attempt to disrupt the strategic parity. And we've been responding to it, and I mentioned that in my State of the Nation address.
Now, I want to bring to your attention right now, he talks about the State of the National Union address that he does, or not union, but the State of the National address that he actually does there. And that's interesting, and I'm going to kind of see if this will not roll into the next, yeah, it does roll into the next video there with Murad Gazdiev. And Murad Gazdiev, an incredible journalist for RT News there, and he actually brings up some of the information that was being brought out during this 4-hour-long marathon questions and answers with the president of Russia. And one of the things that he discussed in this broadcast here is about Russia's capabilities and just how powerful of the weapons that Russia has, and do they really exist? I'd like for you to listen in just for a few seconds here with Murad Gazdiev as well, which, by the way, this is the man that actually interviewed President Bashar al-Assad recently. It's kind of interesting because I'd sent a message to Murad and he had told me he was in Syria, but I didn't realize he was actually there interviewing President Bashar al-Assad. And some of the things, some of the reports that we've been seeing coming out of Israel and, of course, out of the West about Russia giving a green light to attack Iran. I actually asked Murad, this very man you see on your screen now, about that situation there. And he says, well, Steve, you know how it is. There's a lot of fake news going on right now. Listen, though, to what he says here about the weapons, because this became a big issue. They showed some animated videos of some very powerful supersonic weapons that Russia has. And I think that this was more to show the world that deterrent, as we see President Putin was saying, that everyone was actually afraid to do a nuclear war or a third world war because it could bring to an end of civilization as we know it. Listen into this here.
Here, for example, Vladimir Putin recently presented a slew of super weapons. We're talking here about bigger, more powerful, faster nuclear missiles, ballistic missiles, as well as hypersonic missiles, which travel at 6-7 kilometers a second through the atmosphere, about nuclear-powered missiles. And one viewer challenged Vladimir Putin, saying, you know, does this stuff really exist?
There are those who doubt new Russian weapons are soon going to be put into service. Back in 2004, they were doubting the avant-garde system. But now we see it in Syria. And that's not everything that we're planning to produce and put into service. As I said in my address, it's too early to talk about it, but we will speak out soon.
I kind of think that settles that issue right there. And, you know, to me it seems like more that Russia is trying to give a deterrence, as President Putin has done in the past, even in the case of Crimea, when the NATO forces claiming they were going in for a drill, but yet the documentary Crimea, The Way Home, they were the Russian president was saying in this documentary here that indeed what was actually happening was they were coming to take Crimea back. So Russia put the S-400 system out in plain view for NATO to pick up with the satellites, hoping for them to realize that they were ready for war and they were willing to sink every NATO ship there in the Black Sea if necessary. This is a very troubling situation that we're having, friends, and I want to run down some very serious issues that I see here on the horizon here and kind of sum this all up. And we will probably cut this broadcast just a touch short. I am going to go into a few other things there that I think are a little bit sensitive, and I do not want to take the risk of us being shut down, especially we're dealing with the Bilderberg issue, and that's sensitive enough. But anyway, again, and I say this, I don't say this to, I don't even want to say it, because my wife says, this is not a matter of about teaser, it's a matter of about we want to keep Israeli News Live on the air as long as we possibly can. I will be going into some things, and I will tell you a little bit about what it's about before we end the broadcast here, but and then that way at least you'll know what it's about, all right? And then I'll try to find a way to help it to where you guys can see this as well. Anyway, China is also hosting Russia and Iran at a regional security summit. This is something that came out as well today. China opened Saturday a two-day regional security summit attended by Russia, Iran, and other allies confronting rising tensions with the U.S. over trade and Washington's withdrawal from the Iranian nuclear deal. Don't want to lose that on the screen behind us there. I don't know why that always happens right when we're in the middle of the broadcast, but it does. Anyway, so they're talking about the trade wars, etc., but to me it's far more than trade wars. After all, we have the Bilderberg meeting that is going on, the 66th Bilderberg meeting. Kind of ironic, it's the 66th meeting, isn't it? This happening in Turin, Italy. And in fact, gosh, if I had only known a little bit sooner, I would have actually went there. But as we've also been seeing, a lot of the independent journalists have been detained for up to 6 hours at a time, and it's shaken them up just a bit. They know they're trying to scare them. This is the first meeting ever that the Bilderberg meeting really has caused this big of a security movement. with machine guns, military vehicles and everything to protect all the world leaders that are coming there to Turin, Italy. So we were not able to get there. I was not keeping up with the Bilderberg meeting myself, so I wasn't unaware of how quick this was coming up. But nonetheless, would have loved to have been there just to catch mainly what I would have liked to caught was the Cardinal of the Secretary of State, Pauline, who actually is attending the meeting as well, which that should send off all kinds of interesting questions. Populism in Europe is, of course, the main topic that reached #1. But this is really not the issue that caught my attention. It's number 8, Russia. They are talking about Russia at the Bilderberg meeting. That's concerning to me. That's concerning to me in light of everything that is happening right now. Because we have so many other things. I mean, you also have the artificial intelligence, the AI. As I mentioned earlier, President Putin said whoever controls the AI will control the world. All right? And that's what we're going to get into. That's where we're going at. You know, so when we look at this, we go here, we see in the G7, Trump to lead G7, early tensions high after rant over trade. And that rant, by the way, that he made, let's see if I got that on here or not. Back up just a minute. Here it is right here. Here's his rant that he made.
The United States has been taken advantage of for decades and decades. Can't do that anymore. We're like the piggy bank that everybody's robbing, and that ends. Now, we're going to fix that situation. And if it's not fixed, we're not going to deal with these countries. But the relationship that I've had is great, so you can tell that to your fake friends at CNN. I will say it was not contentious. That doesn't mean I agree with what they're doing, and they know very well that I don't. I think the G8 would be better. I think having Russia back in would be a positive thing.
Now, I want to say something about this right here. You know, I'm like straddling the fence sometimes when it comes to President Trump, because there's things that he says, like in this case here, the G8 would be better because it'd be better having Russia back in. That really makes me wonder if President Trump maybe is not trying to avert a world war. Now, I say this, you know, I've got a lot of issues with President Trump, and I can't help but believe that he's also working with the Vatican when it comes to the New World Order, and of course, Israel being that capital. But it does seem, though, that he's wanting to avoid a world war. And as he said, it'd be better to be the G8 instead of the G7, where Russia is back in. Now, I can see where he's making good on what he's saying, because if you look right here, as we jump over here to Facebook, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, here it is. Like I said, one of the other meetings that are going on, Russia's Chief of General Staff, First Deputy Defense Minister General of the Army, Valery Gerasimov, met General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Helsinki on June the 8th. That was yesterday. The two top military chiefs also emphasized the importance of prompt stabilization in the Syrian Arab Republic. Besides, they talked over deconfliction and security in Europe. Dialogue was held in a constructive manner. All right, and you can see some of these photos here taken. This is the Russian side. Just across the table are U.S. military counterparts there. You can see here on the other side, General Dunford. And General Dunford is probably one of the more level heads there of the U.S. administration. If we had, Breedlove in there, then this meeting would not even be happening. He'd be all ready for the war instead, and that's where the trouble really comes in. So there are some positive aspects about this. He also, as he mentions in there about Russia coming in, we have to remember President Trump wanted to have Russia. He wanted him back in and felt like that they could work out their differences and lift the sanctions there. But the deep state, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, the elites is what I meant to say. These guys here are going to make sure that this man doesn't get to pull off, if this is his intention to bring about peace with Russia, they're going to make sure he does not do it. But again, I'm still not convinced fully. These are good things that I see that come from President Trump, but yet I'm just too concerned because he's too much in bed with the Vatican, and that's what really concerns me. But I do appreciate the fact that he's talking about the tariffs, because he's got the issue with how the U.S. is being treated by their trade partners around the world, including the European Union, Canada, etc. But is this the way to go about it? You know, negotiate, try to work some things out. One of the biggest things I think that America could do, if you really want to make things work, bring back your factories from abroad and put them in the United States. You know what? We may have to take some pay cuts here in this country in order to make sure that we can compete with the rest of the world, because after all, you're dealing with the sweatshops in China and other places like that where everything is so cheap. It goes on. Listen, it's not just the United States either. Even the Western countries in Europe here, such as France, have moved all their high-paying jobs out of their country and moved them to the eastern part of Europe after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Like even where I live, here outside of Prague there, I'm not very far from the French automotive maker there, Peugeot, along with several other vehicles that they make here. Because why? The labor is much cheaper. You're talking $5 an hour in US dollars is what their average wage worker makes here, versus no telling what they were making in France, maybe about 10, 15, or 20 euros an hour. So yeah, they're taking advantage of all the cheap labor in the world. It helps out the economies in Czech Republic. I certainly don't want to bring any evil on the people of the Czech Republic, by no means. It's a blessing to them, but they're being taken advantage of because the automakers in France want to save money. All right, so also the NATO Secretary General previews meeting of NATO defense ministers. That's Jens Stoltenberg. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg previewed this week's meeting of NATO defense ministers. The first in alliance of a new headquarters at press conference on Wednesday. Now, here's the thing. They're also, one of the big issues about NATO right now is they're wanting to make sure that they can deploy a rapid force within 30 days. We're talking about 30 battalions, 30 ships, and everything is being focused around Russia. Now, isn't it kind of odd? Jens Stoltenberg ends up at the Bilderberg meeting as well. He's also one of the guests on that particular meeting there, and I don't have time to jump back over there and show you that. But these are the things that are going on, right? And this is what's really troubling. Then you got Iranian forces pose as Syrian soldiers to invade Israel, report says, coming out being produced on Haaretz. Now, this may be true, but the thing is when Murad Gaziev interviewed President Bashar al-Assad, he says there that President Assad says that the Iranian forces have always been there, as far as it was always their leaders, it was their generals that were there, their captains, all their ranking officers helping direct those different militias that are fighting tribesmen that fight inside of Syria to help lead them in battles in order to be more effective. That it wasn't actually Iranian guards in the country. Now, there's a lot of people that differ on that and say that that was not true. But you know, I've even noticed this myself for quite some time now. I've reported on this before, that it's not Iranian troops there, but rather Iranian what do you call those there? The contract fighters, mercenaries that were fighting. And I didn't know where they came from, but I knew that it wasn't actually Iranian troops. We've reported on this before. So to hear the President Assad to actually say this, but yet at the same time, Israel believes that that is not true, and now they believe that the forces are just changing uniforms and coming back. That may be so. But if it's not so, maybe it's only a pretext to justify getting this war started here in the Middle East. You know, what does this all come down to? Now, keep in mind, I want to jump real quick back over here to China hosting the meeting there with their allies there in the region. And of course, the important thing is that we have China and Russia. These are those territories of the north and the east that trouble the king of the north. And we're going to look at this real quick with Daniel once again. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him. All right, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow as he passes through. Now, doesn't say that the king of the south will push at him, as I've said to you guys so many times before. The word im in Hebrew, ayin mem, just by itself, take off the vav, im means with. The vav, the cholam vav right here is with him. With him. Doesn't say he pushes at him. He pushes with the king of the north. So is the Israeli government, which is the king of the south, because the Melech HaNagiv here is not the word south in Hebrew. It is the Negev desert. There's no other Negev desert but in the land of Israel. So it has to be Netanyahu that is pushing at the king of the north. And of course the mystery question is, who's the king of the north? I believe it's a Vatican force. I think I can support that as well, because if you look at the Apocrypha, what is it, of Abraham or is it of Thomas? I forget which one it is, but they actually write in there about in the latter days how that the Roman soldiers, the world economy would be bankrupt by its Roman soldiers. Well, what do you know? That tells you NATO forces are all under Rome's control. Think about that just for a moment. But when you get down to verse 44, this is what kind of really makes a mess, not just out, see, because you got to remember, let me back up here to verse 40 again. When he comes over him, all right? It doesn't, literally it says pushes at him and the king of the north shall come against him. Well, technically, Aliyav is over him. Okay, not, you can translate it against him, but it's technically, if he's pushing with him, then he's not going to come against him. If he was coming against him, the king of the north was going to come against him, then you wouldn't have him saying down here that he would uva barotz, okay? And he comes to the lands, plural, all right? So therefore, that tells us that the king of the south and the king of the north are working together, bringing in these ships, these chariots, and they're coming over him. In other words, they come over the country of Israel and they overthrow these countries in the Middle East, which would be Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Iraq, all these countries. All right, so but what happens though is when we get down to verse 44, this is when something turns, and this is where I believe we deal with a world war. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall affrighten him or trouble him, okay? And he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to take away many, or okay? So he's going to go on a major killing spree. Is that what all these meetings are about? Because China has got them nervous as well, but they're meeting right now. And like I said, you've got Russia warning, that was with President Putin there, warning about a possible third world war, that we're on the brink of a third world war and it would end civilization as we know it, all right? So we see all this. So what are we coming to? What is this being set up? How is all this going to play out, right? Well, you know what, listen, I'm going to take the chance. All right, I'm just going to take the chance. You know, I was going to put this on Patreon when I get to this part here, but we're going to stick our neck out a little bit here. All right, I want you to see something here, and many of you, I'm sure, have already seen this video. This kisses the hands of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the Illuminati right here. You know, and very ominous. And by the way, this video is in Israel. This is at the Holocaust Memorial, and which is kind of very troubling, where the very word Holocaust is, you know, a burnt offering. You know, very troubling indeed. And as you notice, there he goes. He starts to kiss these different leaders' hands, these different Illuminati leaders that have come there, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers there, and just so strange that he would be there, be at this meeting, doing these things here. But it shows the connection. It shows the connection between Rome and the elite there. And so when we see that the Cardinal, the Secretary of State of the Vatican right now is at the Bilderberg meeting, that's a major issue right now, because we see his allegiance with them, and we see what has happened under all the Israeli apologists, such as Rabbi Shapiro being one of them, doing the video where he blasts President Trump for putting the embassy in Jerusalem and calling, not so much, I don't think, the embassy, but calling Jerusalem the capital of Israel, as he begins to defend Pope Francis, and also says that Pope Francis corrected Netanyahu But they don't realize Netanyahu is also playing on the side of the Vatican too. So Shapiro is only trying to justify that it should be an international city. This is what they want to do with Jerusalem. With Israel as a whole, they're going to make the whole country. This is one reason why I think Trump is talking about a regional bloc or a regional initiative that they're doing. They're again kissing all these hands here. Oh gosh, it makes me sick. Anyway, jeez. But you get the point here, right? So this is what's going on. They're getting ready. This New World Order is getting ready to set up. And of course, maybe Russia is in the way. Maybe China is in the way. I don't know. China is not going to be taken down, I do not believe. But they do want to control the Silk Road no matter what. Or is this going to be a situation where they're trying just to destroy nationalism? Maybe Putin is playing in on this as well, you know? And that's the whole problem. It's so hard to figure out who's on what side, or are they all in bed together? You know? Are we just being all played like a bunch of puppets to look stupid out here when in reality this is what's really going on? Now, here's another one that caught my attention on the Middle East Eye. Israeli spy admits we encouraged anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. This guy here in his book that he came out with really said some very shocking things in here, and this also only goes to show where the Vatican plays in on this and how that this has been a movement in order to bring about a new world order. Maybe that's not what he's intending to say when he speaks about things in here, but it definitely shows us some of those makings here. Here's one of the things here. Another such alliance sought was that the Maronite Christians of Lebanon. Such plans have a long and well-documented history going back to 1954, when, according to the diaries of former Israeli Prime Minister Moshe Sharit, David Ben-Gurion drew up plans to invade Lebanon and impose a Christian state on the country. Gosh, man, how many times have I told you guys about Ben-Gurion and Moshe Sharit? These are your first two prime ministers of Israel. In fact, Moshe Sharit was the foreign minister of Israel during the time that Ben-Gurion was the president, or excuse me, was the prime minister of Israel. And they were talking about in 1954 invading Lebanon and making it a Christian state. What do you think they're planning on doing then in Israel? What do you think is going on now? The Vatican is going to get Jerusalem. They're going to take the old city. The Bible says they will. It says in Revelation 11, they will be given the old city. They shall tread underfoot 40 and 2 months. And at the same time, your two witnesses will come on the scene. You guys better buckle up. I know a lot of people think, oh, we're going up as soon as this all happens. I don't think so. I do believe that something's going to happen because, you know, God does say, people say, are you pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib? I'm any-time trib. But let me tell you one thing. God said he's going to spare us from his wrath. Didn't say anything about man's wrath. That's the only statement I'll make when it comes to that right there. He said he'll hide us during his wrath, and his wrath begins at the death of the two witnesses. That's the only place I can see it, okay, scripturally. All right, now, anyway, though, he goes, however, a few of these plans to find allies have come too much. Gamaliel was assassinated shortly after his imposition in the country. The Shah was overthrown by a revolution. An Islamic Republic was established in Iran. Ironically, today, Israel's main ally in the region is the Saudi regime, which is right at the heart of the Arab world. Although the two countries do not have official diplomatic ties, they are working together on more violent, subversive than ever, especially when it comes to opposing Iranian influence. Notice the terminology he uses, the violence. What does it say in Daniel 11, verse 14? The violent among your people will try to establish the vision. In a recent interview in the Israeli press to promote his book about this periphery doctrine, Alford does indeed make a telling statement, giving away perhaps more than he intended. Watch this here. Of some of the anti-democratic regimes in the region he was seeking to forge ties with, he states, we knew that the issue of the protocols of the elders of Zion plays a very important role for them to a certain degree. Even we played that card so they'd think we have immense influence over the world and could manipulate U.S. policy in their favor in particular. The Moroccans, the Iranians, the Turks, Idi Amin, they were all sure that one word from us would change Washington's positions towards them. The elders of Zion? Let me tell you something, friends. Okay, the elders of Zion, look at here. Who did you have? Oh, geez. No. Don't do that yet, Jack. Back it up. There you go. Who they in bed with? Pope of Rome. Who are they going to put over the old city? Pope of Rome. The face of the New World Order? Pope of Rome. The man to bring the peace? Pope of Rome. How many times I tell you guys, the Assyrian, you get all these biblical issues in there. All right, people say, oh no, he's a Jew, because it says the prince of Israel. And then you say, no, he's an Assyrian, because we have the scripture on the Assyrian as well. Isaiah 10, chapter 10, is Assyrian. Ezekiel 21 assumes that it's a Jewish man because he calls him the Prince of Israel. Daniel 9 reveals him to be a Roman and an Edomite as well. And I showed you emphatically, tying these scriptures together in the message last night, that they're all one and the same. Hadad himself, the sole surviving heir of the direct lineage of Esau, raised in Pharaoh's house when he escapes, when they take him there as a little boy, grows up, marries an Egyptian wife, because I also said there's the Egyptian side of this as well, especially when it speaks about what? What does it say about Jerusalem? It becomes Sodom and Egypt. I didn't even bring that out yesterday. Remember that prophecy there? And thanks to Netanyahu, we have Sodom for the country of Israel right now, especially Jerusalem, because he allowed the gay parade in there, right? And then you have also the fact that, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. Guess what they were doing on Shabbat in Tel Aviv yesterday? Yeah, again, another gay pride thing, right? Oh my God, how sick can the country possibly get, right? All right, so the whole thing is Hadad, though, he marries an Egyptian wife, has children by her. They go back later in life. They go and they end up in Damascus. He becomes the king there, and his children end up marrying among the Assyrians. Well, what do you know? Then you have the Esau, the Edomite. You have the Egyptian wife with the children, so they're half Edomite, half Egyptians. Their children go into the region of Assyria, which Damascus was also under that at one time, and they become, they marry in amongst them, and now you've got Edomite, Egyptian, Assyrian, and of course Obadiah puts him over in Rome when he destroys the temple and the sanctuary, and he says, you stood as if you were one of them. The only one that stood aside and didn't do the dirty work, but let the Assyrians do the dirty work, was Titus, the Roman general, where they made the ark after Titus. All right, so now you got the Romans, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and of course Daniel also says that he is the prince that shall come, who is of the people that destroyed the temple and the sanctuary. What do you know? Jeez. And I can't believe when people sit there and steal. I guess people just don't listen. Just like the Lord Jesus said to me in the vision back when I was 18 years old. He said, man will hear more often than he listens. Boy, he was dead on, wasn't he? Dead on to it. So anyway, to convince certain regimes that had power influence over the Americans, Israel actually encouraged belief in the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that Jews controlled the world. The protocol is notorious Tsarist forgery. It's another reminder that Zionism is indeed a form of anti-Semitism. This may seem counterintuitive for a country that claims to be a Jewish state, but there is a long history of Zionist leaders making anti-Semitic statements and encouraging hatred against Jews, including Arthur Ruppin and even Theodor Herzl himself. This is something I have dubbed Zionist anti-Semitism. And I'll tell you something too, friends. You'll be surprised what he's saying there. I mean, you look at George Soros. He's one of them, but it's not just George Soros. I'm going to be doing an in-depth one on Patreon about this. Just how many Jews betrayed our own people and sent them to the oven so that they could get a little small number of Jews over into the state of Israel to make this state right here. And let me tell you who was doing the helping with them to get there too. It was the Vatican helping them to get there. Working with the Nazis. They didn't just have a rat line in order to get all the murderers out and into Argentina. They also had their rat line set up to get all the rats that betrayed the Jewish people over into Israel. And isn't it interesting that we have laws being passed all over the world right now that you can't say a word against Israel? You know why? Because they don't want that government touched. They know that's where the New World Order is going to be. Even South Carolina in the United States has now passed a law. You cannot say a single word. And they're using the Holocaust and what's happened to the Jewish people, which is my people, my family members. And I've got tons of documents from the Holocaust Memorial of my family that have died in the Holocaust, both my mother's side and my father's side. But they use that. Not the true Jewish people in Israel that are really God-fearing, God-loving people. But these crooked leaders that were sent to Israel to be the ones that would lead the nation, they wanted a secular state. They didn't want a religious state. That's why they were trying to kill off all the Orthodox Jews. Unless they can get one that kind of sides with the Vatican. Yeah, sure, just like the Jewish Congress. You know, I got one word for the Jewish Congress. You need to repent, every one of you, because you're duped. And no wonder why God says you're blind, naked. Well, no, that's the Gentiles, sorry. But where Yeshua says that you were blind. And as Paul wrote in Romans 11, you'd be blind for the sake of the Gentiles so that they could receive the Messiah. But the hour is coming where you'll have an opportunity to see. Now, something else I want to share with you right here. This is on henrymacko.com on his website here. This is one here. Let me just read this to you here. In Hungary, my basic orders were to ship all the Jews out of Hungary in as short a time as possible. Let me back this up. Because this man right here that you're looking at, this is a book by Perfidy. This is only just some of the insights from that book right there. Let me see if I can blow this up bigger for you guys, because I know you guys need to be able to see what's on here. Okay? How Britain's Biggest Racist Created Zionism by Mark Birdman, the campaigner. Okay, the book Perfidy, written by playwright Ben Hite in 1961, the single most damning statement to date on the interchangeability of the British Zionist cabal that ran Israel during its early years, the leaders of the Nazis. In the book, Hite presented extended excerpts from the famous 1953 Kastner trial, in which the pro-Nazi activities of Rudolf Kastner, left head of the Hungarian branch of the so-called Jewish Agency Rescue Committee during World War II, and later a spokesman for the Ministry of Trade and Industry. All right? By the way, what I am recording is no longer recording. We came to an end on that part there, so let's just pray to God that this stays good on our live stream. Are you guys still over there? Y'all hanging in there still good? The stream is not the best in the world, but I see you guys are, I think you're still there. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Let's see here. So, all right. Yes, you are. Bless the Lord. All right, let me go back over here. So anyway, Kastner, an Israeli court was shown systematically Kastner, one of the inner circle of the Zionist elite around Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion during 1943 to 53 decade, was revealed to have been the main Zionist agent of the Nazi exterminators of the Hungarian Jews. You know, this is what troubles me, guys. You have no idea how much this bothers me. Because I had a feeling that those that were the first leaders of Israel, including Ben-Gurion, were involved in one way or another, whether it be directly or indirectly, in so many of our people going to their deaths. I'm going to read this to you again. Kastner, one of the inner circles of the Zionist elite around Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in the 1943 to 53 decade, was revealed to have been the main Zionist agent of the Nazi exterminators of Hungarian Jews. So Ben-Gurion was considered one of the elite. Kastner, an Israeli court was shown, systematically deluded the leadership of the Hungarians, 800,000 Jews, into believing that the Nazis were interested merely in mass relocation of the Jews, not mass murder. In return for this genocidal deception, Kastner was allowed to handpick a small Zionist elite of 388 Jews, mostly from his own family, to flee to Palestine. Well, what do you know? Hayek's book detailed Kastner's collaboration with Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Eichmann, and others with such precision that this book was suppressed, censored, and removed from the libraries. Hayek's wife, who after his death tried to get the book republished, has been subjected to pressure and threats from the Zionist lobby in the U.S. today. Copies of Hayek's book are distributed virtually on black market basis. I encourage you to try to find a copy of it. Excerpts from Perfidy are printed below. We begin with Adolf Eichmann's testimony to the Kastner's activities, which Hayek quoted from Eichmann's confessions published in the November 28, December 5th, 1960s edition of Life magazine. Let me tell you something. Being a little bit dyslexic might come to my advantage right about now, because not being able to pronounce names very well might help their little Google robots out there not to pick up on what I'm saying. All right? In Hungary, my basic orders were to ship all the Jews out of Hungary in as short a time as possible. In obedience to Himmler's directive, I now concentrated on negotiations with Jewish political officials in Budapest, among them Dr. Rudolf Kastner. Authorized representatives of the Zionist movement. This Dr. Kastner was a young man about my age and an ice-cold lawyer and a fanatical Zionist. He agreed to help keep the Jews from resisting deportation and even keep order in the collection camps if I would close my eyes and let a few hundred of a few thousand young Jews immigrate illegally to Palestine. It was a good bargain for keeping order in the camps. The price was not too high for me. We trusted each other perfectly. When he was with me, Kastner smoked cigarettes as though he were in a coffee house. While we talked, he would smoke one aromatic cigarette after another, taking them from a silver case and lighting them with a silver lighter. With his great polish and reserve, he would have made an ideal Gestapo officer himself. Yeah, you know what causes a lot of chain smoking? Nerves. When you know you're doing evil. You know, better to die with the despised few than to be a traitor to your own people. Dr. Kastner's main concern was to make it possible for a select group of Hungarian Jews to immigrate to Israel. As a matter of fact, there was a very strong similarity between our attitudes in the SS and the viewpoint of these immensely idealistic Zionist leaders. I believe that Kastner would have sacrificed 1,000 or 100,000 of his blood to achieve his political goal. You can have the others, he would say, but let me have this group here. And because Kastner rendered us a great service by helping to keep the deportation camps peaceful, I would let his group escape. After all, I was not concerned with small groups of 1,000 or so Jews. That was the gentleman's agreement I had with the Jews, page 261. This is only one of many things that could be said. By the way, to show you how the Catholic Church, though, is having that great influence and getting ready to set up the New World Order, and even how Saudi Arabia is playing a big part in this, we have here on CBN, The Christian Perspective, a breakthrough for churches in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has made a deal with the Vatican to allow churches for Christian worshipers, according to an Egyptian English language website. The Egyptian Independent reports the agreement between Roman Catholic Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran and Mohammed bin Abdel Karim al-Isa in the Muslim World League. Isn't it interesting? Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran, always the guy out there, the one that said there will be no peace in Jerusalem until all the properties are worked out with the Vatican. Giulio Miotti reported on this right here. Also, we see that they're now giving women driver's license. By the way, these were some of the issues that were brought up by Pope Benedict when he visited the Saudi kingdom. And now they're getting them. Why? Because the New World Order is taking shape. This is where we're at, friends. This is what's really going on. I don't know if they'll ban this video. I hope not. If they do, they block it, whatever, then we'll just load it up on Patreon. You don't get the whole thing, but I can redo it for Patreon regardless, if that's the case. I only had 34 minutes left on the disc as it was. And it's very troubling, friends. Very troubling what we're seeing going on right now. But we are in a late hour, a very late hour. We are on the brink of a possible war, global war. But I think it's a global war they want to have. This is something the elite need, because even as, which Prince of England was it that made the statement recently? There's too many people in the world. They want this global war. They need to weed them out. They're also wanting to pass all these new laws, etc. We're really, really, really in a very late hour, friends. And I came on a little bit early tonight. I just really needed to get this information out to you. Pray for us. It's a serious hour we're living in. And if you really want to know truth and you appreciate what we're doing, please help support the work we're doing. Without your support, I can't do the things that I do here. My wife works relentlessly and tirelessly in the background in research. She is a remarkable research, and a lot of what I brought out today, half of this is her work itself. So we do appreciate your help. It's IsraeliNewsLive.org is where you can contribute, be a part of this. If you have trouble, being able to be a part, partnering with us there on Israeli News Live, because we know some people say they can't give there. We've had several people go to Patreon and use that format there to where they can pledge monthly to be a part there. And as well, I share insights there where I'm a little bit more reluctant. This is one of those that I normally would share on Patreon because of the sensitivity. This is the type of stuff that they're looking to flag, to shut you down for. And this is what we're trying to avoid, because Israeli News Live reaches a lot of people all over the world. Different faiths, different beliefs, everything. And we really try to be very unbiased. When I say try to be, I don't mean it just in saying that, well, we're still biased. No, I really try to look at everything very balanced when I look at things. And I'm very concerned for my own people in Israel right now. And this is what's really troubling me, that a lot of people they don't realize. They think, oh, Steve, I can't believe you're changing. You're not for Netanyahu. How long do you stand with a leader when the leader is supporting all the things that are totally against the Word of God, totally against Torah, mind you? The leaders of Israel, when they're bringing in a new world order and using Israel as the very staging place, when I have biblical proofs that tell you that the leaders of Israel are going to do these kind of wicked things, and yet the people are still so fanatically crazy about the Israeli government thinking that this is truly of God, that, and believe me, at one time, I didn't have the revelations that I had at one time. I stood with Israel just as much as you guys did. And then, of course, Shimon Peres, I caught that early on. I saw the things. God began to reveal things. And the more that He reveals, the more that I see how many of them are in bed with the Vatican and what they're trying to do. They're bringing about a new world order. And it's going to affect everybody on the planet. Your liberties, your freedoms, your right to bear arms in the United States, your right of freedom of speech in the United States is coming to an end because of this new world order. And unfortunately, as you saw in here, as you saw in this very thing here, you see the Pope himself shaking hands with all the elites here, okay, with the Rothschilds, with the Rockefellers. You see also here from this Israeli spy revealing the things that they did. Israeli spy admits we encourage anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. They weren't theories, they're realities. All right? You see here, as I share with you, from this website here, henrymacko.com. If I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Henry, please forgive me. And God bless that man for bringing this information together there. We see how that they were sacrificing thousands of Jews so they get their elite over there. Why do you think, and listen, You want to know how I know the Vatican was involved in this? All right? Now he shows you that Ben Gurion was part of the inner circles of Rudolf Kastner. Dr. Rudolf Kastner, right? Ben Gurion was part of his inner circle. What did Moshe Sharit do? Moshe Sharit went and personally thanked Pope Pius XII for helping the Jews. What Jews was Pope Pius XII helping? He was only helping those elite Jews that they wanted to create the state of Israel with. Listen, does it begin to make sense to you? Why do you think when they were sending shiploads of Jews to try to immigrate into Palestine, that they turned the ships back and sent them to the death camps in the war? They were not the Jews they wanted in that land. They could not have any competition in the creation of the state because the Vatican was the one making sure they got there safely. They were using the Catholic Church to do that part. Jeez. So where are we at? Putin says, very close to that world war. It could change everything as we know it. Maybe he's really sincere. Maybe this man is really trying to prevent something. Scripturally, it may be that he really is. Because if you look at the scripture on it, tidings out of the north and out of the east trouble him. Trouble who? The king of the north. That doesn't show that there's a conspiracy. The only conspiracy we see in Daniel chapter 11 is that the king of the south and the king of the north. That's the conspiracy. It seems, though, that this war here only happens after I think the Iranian conflict starts. So maybe President Putin is really a good man, and we're overlooking it. Because you know, friends, I don't examine things just by the news. I examine it by the Word of God. That's where I go to. All right? But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall affrighten him. If the king of the north was working with Vladimir Putin, then why would it trouble him? I don't know. I'm watching everything as it goes on. I love you guys tremendously. Our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org. Thank you, our moderators, for moderating this evening. I'm sure I'll probably give you a handful of things to have to deal with all my big mouth and what I have to say here. Let's pray that this video does go up. We have 830 watching. You know, there's one thing you can do that'll really be a blessing for me. Once this video is fully up, can you guys share this everywhere you possibly can? I mean, let's really blast it out there. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever kind of social media platforms you've got. If you guys if you actually have blogs or websites, write about this particular message. Put a link in there to this message. Put a link to IsraeliNewsLive.org in there. The more that we can get, especially in what they call search engine optimization, the more blogs that would write about what we're talking about now, and including IsraeliNewsLive.org and a link to this particular broadcast in your blogs, no matter how small your blog is, or even your Facebook page, anywhere you write about, write some content to it and everything. Believe me, it'll cause this video get to the millions of people that need to hear what we've said today, because this is where we're headed. And the thing is, you know, I don't know. We've got to make a stand, do something. Maybe we could turn this thing around. Even if we don't, always remember one thing. At least stand on the side of truth. When the enemy comes in, God will raise up a standard against him. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Shalom in a world of Ein Shalom. There is no peace. Erev Tov.